You were right. You knew it was a bad idea and I did it anyway. I am so sorry. Please know that. I know you must be looking for me and I'm sorry that I worried you. I'm sorry for the time being. But please hear me out. I at least want this known by someone. When I dropped that money we were going for to use for Christmas, I couldn't forgive myself. I knew that you were sad, even though you tried your best to hide it. I swear it must have fallen out of my pocket at the gas station near my office, but that really doesn't matter how much now, I guess. But that really doesn't matter much now, I guess. I just wanted to make it up to you. I went online and I searched for local job opportunities. I searched through easily a dozen online ads with no luck. I tried to sell my fellas for some extra cash, but they said that I was too short for the client's standards. I even also sold plasma, but the check barely covered my gas for the trip. And it was Tuesday when I saw the ad. I know that feels like an eternity ago now. I was in Blackburg. The pawn shop gives better prices for tools, and I thought about selling my weed eater. Well, when I was on the way, I saw an ad on the side of the road and couldn't resist calling the number. It was a cheap plastic sign with big black lettering in permanent ink. Across it ran the words, "Need cash? Call 555-0782. And I did just that. I called the number and I listened to the ringing. The line rang, and after a few rings, I heard music begin playing. A woman's voice appeared over the line, clearly a pre-recorded message which said, "Deerfield Medical Analytics, providing you with the newest and most innovative research on the market today. Please stay on the line and one of our well-trained operators will soon be with you." And from there, the music played softly for another moment when a man's voice interjected.
"Hello, and thank you for calling Richland Tests. My name is John. How may I be of assistance?"
His voice was cheery and upbeat, and he sounded young and full of enthusiasm, but I'm sure that was an act, egged on by his employer. "Yes," I spoke up. "I saw an ad for immediate cash with this number attached."
"Oh, of course,"
he chirped up.
"We can certainly help there. Tell me, when is the best time to come into one of our offices for an interview?"
"Well, now, I guess. Will it take long? And what will I be doing?"
"It won't take long at all. We just ask a few questions, sign you up for one of our programs, and pay you accordingly."
I mulled over what I was just told. I was moderately healthy, so I wasn't sure what they would have me trying out. After all, this place did say that it was a medical lab. "Where do I go?" I asked, figuring that it wouldn't hurt to go by their office and see what they were offering. And from there, the man insisted on guiding me over to the phone. He didn't actually give me their address. I thought that it was extremely weird, but it wasn't very far. So I complied and I let him tell me where to go based off of my location. And after a few turns and long uncomfortable silences in between the directions being given, I finally came upon their building. It was in no way what I had expected. I had imagined a doctor's office type of building, or at worst I expected some office complex. This wasn't even that nice. It was attached to a rundown strip mall. The parking lot was largely empty and the building itself must have been built in the 90s. The first store was a makeshift church. The second was empty. The third was where I was going, and the last was a hair salon with bars on its windows. A few unsavory-looking characters were sitting on the curb smoking, and another was wandering the lot on a cell phone. I got out of my car and I hung up the phone. Needless to say, I locked my car. I slowly approached the little office where I would hopefully make back that cash. The windows were covered on the inside by white paper, so I couldn't see within. And the name on the old brown tin roof read, Logistics LLC. I opened the door, nerves setting in. Once inside, I saw a small waiting area. 3 chairs were along the wall and a sign-in desk sat across from them. The room itself was very small, with a door leading further into the complex directly in front of where I stood. The walls were covered in white wallpaper, as were all the windows, it seemed. The floor was composed of scuffed, off-white tiles, and the ceiling housed buzzing fluorescent lights. In one of the chairs was another man, an older gentleman who was intently reading a book. He didn't seem to notice that I had walked in. At the desk was a blonde woman, probably mid-30s. She was in blue scrubs, which I found odd, but at this point everything was. She stood to greet me with a smile.
"Hello, my name is Jane," she waved gladly. "Please, sign in here and have a seat. The lab technicians will see you shortly."
And I did just that. I assumed that they knew that I was coming, so I ignored how she didn't ask what I was doing or why I was there. I filled out the sheet and I sat, trying to allow an empty space between the old man and myself. I recorded my name, birthday, and as well as the time that I signed in. I was the only name on the entirely blank sheet of paper. And that worried me, but not as much as the header. Across the top of the page read, Mind Inc. Know the mind, know the world. This was the fourth different name given by this group, and I honestly wasn't sure what to make of it. Why were they so hard to pin down? Was it multiple groups and this is just the nearest test to my location? I decided foolishly that it wasn't worth the mental strain and to just go with the flow. And that was my problem, isn't it? You always tell me to think things through and I don't. I suppose I got what I deserved from it. I sat for not even a minute when the door opened and an older gentleman emerged. "Hello," he said cleanly towards me. He was thin and balding, mid-50s maybe. He had a trimmed white beard and wore black-rimmed glasses. He was dressed in a lab coat with a white shirt and blue tie underneath. I don't know why I remember that, but it's worth mentioning. "Hello?" I returned the greeting and stood extending my hand. He shook it and continued. "I'm Dr. John. It's nice to meet you. If you'd come with me, we'll do a brief profile on you and then discuss what we'll be undertaking." "Great," I said, trying to sound excited. And before I could move, Jane called after me.
Sir?"
She said in a weird mix of stern and sweet.
"We do ask that you leave all electronics with the front desk."
She said this holding a small wicker tray, and I placed my phone and my handheld gaming device in the basket without argument, hoping that I wouldn't get bored at any point. The old man reading didn't even look up. I followed him to the next room where only a metal table and two folding chairs resided. He motioned to one while he took the other, and at the opposite wall was another wooden door. The rest of the room was entirely blank, which made it oppressively bright. He set down a clipboard and pen and made sure that he was comfortable. I wish that I could have been, but with the cold metal beneath me and the nagging office lighting above me, I was the farthest thing from relaxed. "Okay," he began, holding up the pen and clipboard. "We're going to ask you a series of seemingly random questions. Some may seem awkward or even offensive. If at any point you are uncomfortable by a question, you may pass. Give the shortest answers possible, please. Is that all right?" "Sure." I was trailing. This isn't a cult or anything, is it?" And the doctor laughed. No, he responded as if my question was the weirdest thing about all of this. "We do medical research and pay our participants. Many of our tests are psychological, so we have to ask certain things. Is that all right?" "Okay. Sure." I felt a little relief at a straight explanation finally. "Let's begin, shall we?" he asked rhetorically. Now, I honestly don't remember every question, but I'll record what I can recall to give you an idea of what they considered a psych evaluation. Question 1. Are you married? Yes. Question 2. How long? 3 years. Question 3 was, are your children happy? Yes. 4. Did you ever have a pet? Yes. Question 5. How many sexual partners have you had? 5. 6. Have you ever committed a crime? Yes. Question 7. Have you ever committed a felony? No. 8. Have you ever been sexually abused? No. 9. Have you ever sexually abused anyone?
God, no.
Question 10. Not even your spouse? No. Question 11, if yes to question 4. Have you ever physically abused your pets? No. Question 12. Have you ever sexually abused your pets? No. Question 11. Have you taken pleasure in abusing or killing any small animals?
Absolutely not.
Question 14. Have you ever derived sexual gratification from extreme pain, either to yourself or others? No. And it went on like this. They would ask a series of mental questions and then warp them more and more violently. And it did make me uncomfortable, but I didn't pass on any for fear of losing the opportunity to make the money that we needed. I just assumed that they wanted to protect the volunteer from any adverse side effects. And once the questionnaire was completed, the doctor handed me $50 out of his pocket. And I remember it because it was just so abrupt. It wasn't a check or even an envelope. He literally pulled a $50 bill out of his coat pocket and handed it to me. It was as if the questions got him excited and maybe I was being compensated for that arousal. At least, that's how it felt. And then he said, "We pay for every questionnaire. The next step is a quick checkup and then the experiment. I will read you the description, and upon agreement, you will receive $250 at the beginning and $250 at the end of the experiment." And at this point, my mouth was watering. That would cover the cash that I lost, plus $50 more. I didn't care in that moment what I would be testing. I only cared about that payment, which, in hindsight, was my biggest pitfall. The doctor then led me to the final room. Inside was an examination table where a patient would lie down. There was a sink with soap and paper towels, and beside it was a metal cart with all sorts of Tupperware containers. 2 trash cans sat beside the cart, one for needles and one for paper. And last was a small rolling stool for the doctor. All in all, it looked like a generic checkup room at a doctor's office, all except for the bare, white walls and a small speaker mounted above the door. He motioned for me to lie down on the examination table, and I complied. And from here, he did a very brief checkup on my vitals, my blood pressure, reflexes, ears, tongue, nose, heartbeat, height, weight, and as well as my BMI. I tolerated it all for the thought of that money. "All right," he said cheerfully, pulling a stapled form from one of the Tupperware containers. He handed it to me along with a pen and said, "Read it, and if you agree, sign your name at the bottom of the last page." He folded his arms and he waited for me to finish reading the contract. It was wordy, but the gist was that I was going to try a new type of neural implant. The clauses within stated that I was not allowed to share any information about the testing under threat of legal action, but at this point I did not see that happening, and I signed my name as well as my fate. The doctor took the paper, smiling. He placed it on his clipboard with my answered questions. He told me to lie down, and I did. "Okay then," he breathed out, barely masking his mouth-watering excitement. "Let's get started." He rolled his stool to the metal cart again and grabbed 2 surgical gloves. And after putting them on, he opened another container and withdrew a single white pill. He handed it to me with a very small, unopened water bottle. He told me to take it for balance. And I did. As I took the pill, he reached into another container plastic bag, so small that I thought that it might contain a sterile needle or something similar. He gently tore a small hole into the bag and shook it delicately over his gloved hand. And after a moment, a small, barely noticeable piece of plastic landed on his palm. He carefully pinched it between his thumb and forefinger and held it to the light so that way I could see. "Behold," he said, more to himself than to me, "power of God." And I beheld it. I was not sure what this thing would do to me. It could be dangerous. It could kill me. And all these thoughts began pouring in as he rolled himself back to where I lay. "You'll only feel a tiny pinch," he calmly stated, snapping me out of my panic. And the pinch cut me off. It was done. It was in. I felt what he was talking about. I would compare it best to maybe a mosquito bite. It was so mild that I wouldn't have noticed it in any other setting. It sat at the back of my neck, right at the base of my ear. "Okay," the doctor said, checking his watch. "I'll be back in about 15 minutes. And I sat, bored out of my mind. I had no phone and no games. I just had to stare at the blank walls and remain patient. It was some time before I heard a small chime and what sounded like a PA system. I turned my head to the speaker above the door, and after a static adjustment, I heard the doctor's voice. "Okay. I will no longer physically enter the room as to not corrupt the experiment. We have 4 other candidates we have interviewed who will now assist with the test 1 at the time. They will not touch you and they will not speak. The first will sit on the stool beside you. I will start the timer for about 3 minutes and he will leave. He will then give a report on what occurred." I tensed up. What is he talking about? A man is just going to walk in, sit in uncomfortable silence for 3 minutes and leave? Well, that's just what happened. The door opened with a creak. Ominous and slow. And in stepped a figure that I had recognized almost immediately. It was the man in the parking lot who was on his phone. He was maybe in his mid-30s, Hispanic with a thin mustache. He wore tattered jeans and a navy hooded sweatshirt. He sat wordlessly about 2 minutes from the examination table where I sat reclined. And we stared at each other awkwardly when I felt it. "Hello? Hello? 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 Hello?" And I felt this over and over in my mind, and I responded aloud. "Hello?" And the man nodded. His nod confirmed my suspicion. This was his thought being transmitted into my mind. And from there, things progressed differently. We see it on the television. We read comics. We know about superheroes who can read minds or cheap carnies who can claim to have the gift. However, real telepathy, real ways of reading the mind are different than how we see them portrayed in print or in film and lies. I was thrust beyond his foremost thoughts. I was seeing the past through his eyes. The first thing that I understood was that he had a script that he was supposed to follow. First, hello, and then, how are you? Then, is it hot out? And so on with short answer questions until time runs out. However, I instantly understood and ignored the man now actively thinking, "How are you?" over and over until I replied. I saw past that thought into the next level. I saw him taking the questionnaire this morning, the same as I did. And this is where I began to comprehend the individual before me. Each question sent him down a scan of his own memory. Each yes came with another deeper thought. He answered yes about being married, and I instantly saw all the knowledge that he had about his wife. He walked with her, his most intimate thoughts about her. Every fight, every kiss, every dinner, all of them blasting through my mind in an instant. He answered yes to other questions as well. And when the doctor asked about animal abuse, he paused and shakily responded in the affirmative to having harmed small animals and pets. From here, I was forced to live through those memories in my mind. The fires, the mutilations. This man was a monster. He did so much evil in just that area alone. And I began to scream. And once you see something like that so vividly in your mind's eye, it begins to break you. The man stood and exited quietly, slamming the door on his way out. And then nothing. Relief came almost immediately. I sat, shaking in my chair with the sheer intense strain that I had just felt. My mind was reeling with the lifetime of another being forced upon it. I couldn't stand. I just lay there like a loser in a boxing match. I just froze.
Okay, that wasn't quite 3 minutes, more like 32 seconds. Let's try again with another candidate. He has been instructed to wait in the room until I instruct otherwise.
I turned my eyes to the speaker. My head was heavy and my responses were slow. The door opened slowly to reveal the next man. He was maybe 18. He was young and I recognized him as one of the two smoking in front of the shop outside. He was skinny and his head was shaved. He wore black combat boots and jeans with a white t-shirt. He sat abruptly and peered at me through his small green eyes. And then I heard it. His foremost thought. However, it wasn't like the first man, scripted and rehearsed. No. His thoughts were only that of hate.
You look like a Jew. I hate Jews. I'll smash your head in as soon as you leave here.
He rambled on like this the entire time. However, I was only able to focus on it with the waves of memories that I was witnessing. He was a neo-Nazi. He beat on minorities mercilessly. So many images of bloodied faces and crying children bombarded my psyche in the moments that followed. He was evil. Pure evil. Memories appeared of young black men and women being violently assaulted by this man and his friends. I saw the young Jewish school children being harassed and bullied and beaten beyond measure. I saw the tortured victims of an agenda of only hate. And their anguished screams will forever haunt me. The only one that stuck out was the memory that ended in a makeshift secret burial. A young black girl. The worst thing about this all is that none of what I had witnessed in my mind could be used as evidence. That's probably what hurts the most. That. And hurting you. Again, I'm sorry. I wish that I would have known not to do this. It doesn't end there, though. After the assault of this man's heinous crimes, I could take no more. Murderer! Was the only word that I could bark out. I shrieked it loud enough to startle the man. His eyes grew wide at realizing that I could, in fact, see his thoughts. And from there, he bolted out the door without another word. And my breathing was labored. I could hardly keep the tears back from my eyes. I was still entirely immobile from what I now know was not a balance hill. And I sat back shaking and sputtering. And the PA crackled.
All right, that went poorly as well.
The doctor's voice broke my miserable silence. I couldn't see into him like the others. They had to be close to me, physically, for the chip to pick up on their thoughts. And the doctor spoke again, snapping me out of my realization.
We're going to go ahead and send our last candidate in. He has been instructed to not leave under any circumstances. He's going to remain until 20 full minutes have passed.
And I wheezed and I struggled. But the only thing that I could manage was a weak no. It echoed in silence. The door creaked a final time and I saw the man from earlier. He still had his book tucked under his arm. He was portly and balding. He wore stained khakis and an orange button-up Hawaiian shirt. And he walked wordlessly to the stool and he sat. Without even acknowledging me, he began to read to himself. And I was trying my hardest not to peer into this man's mind, but it was outside of my control. And I stared intently at the book in his hands. It was some sort of crime drama, if I recall, but I wasn't able to focus on that long. As I tried to focus on not thinking, the cover of his book became a pinpoint. And I began to hear the words in his mind. And as he read, so did I. I was slipping into his consciousness against my best efforts, but I soon found myself going deeper. I tried to focus on the pages of the book and the words being read, but I slowly found myself remembering his life. He's single. He lives in a tiny apartment. And he also does unspeakable evil. It is here that I should point out something peculiar. I could not register names. All three men who entered the room, I could know their entire life story, but their names were oppressed mentally. And likewise, it is almost impossible to remember number sequences in someone else's mind. Addresses, phone numbers, dates, times were all either wrong or obviously nonsensical. I was hostage to whatever base thoughts were the most prevalent. This means the things that they loved, the things that they hated, and the things that aroused them. And in this man's case, it was proclivity for, well, children. I hate to even write this, but I don't even know if this is permanent, and I need the truth to be seen. Through my mind, I watched from this man's eyes. I saw his computer, which held unspeakable horrors. I saw the park that he frequented on Friday afternoons. I saw the poor attempts at luring them. And worse, however, were the successful ones. What I saw will forever be burned into my mind as if I were the one committing the acts. God help me. All the while he sat with a smug grin while calmly reading his book. And I stared in horror, unwinding his essence with my own prison of a mind. I am reminded of the scene from A Clockwork Orange, where the man is forced to watch terrible things on a screen and is unable to take his eyes away from it. This is what was happening. I had screamed. I managed it only after what felt like an eternity in this sick individual's world. I screamed and I screamed and I screamed more, and then I finally puked. My chest and lap were now covered in my excess breakfast, but in that I saw the pill. And I laid my head back and I accepted my fate. And from there I endured the full remaining 19 and a half minutes. And I knew this man intimately. I saw the abuses that he suffered as a child. I saw the times that he was arrested. I saw the sheer, unapologetic cruelty that he had harbored. I saw the face of each and every one of them that he had victimized. I saw the faces of the now broken families in court, and I saw everything. I endured this for an unending 20 minutes. And at the end of this time, the man stood up without saying anything and exited the room. He left as if though he already knew. He knew that I knew, and he derived pleasure from that. The last thing that I knew of this man was his happy, chipper whistling as he departed from the room. And that I was catatonic at this point. I lay, mouth agape and eyes wide, in a puddle of my own fluids. I only wanted to get out. And to be free. And then I realized that I could move my fingers. I managed to wriggle my legs and my arms. I was regaining control. When I vomited up the pill, it must not have had enough time to fully paralyze me. I tried to stand, but heard the doorknob turn. I lay back perfectly still as the doctor returned. "Don't try it," he said, looking down at his clipboard, giving me no attention. He motioned to a small silver chip in the center of his forehead. "It won't work on me." I lay still, my eyes the only thing moving on my body. I watched as he walked over to the Tupperware cart and withdrew a syringe. "This will make it all go away." He had trailed, his eyes beaming at what I assumed was a final solution to what they had just done to me. And I had to act. Adrenaline began coursing violently through my veins. I leapt towards him, slamming him into the cart. We wrestled, but due to his age and the surprise that I managed to work the needle into his neck and force the plunger down. "No!" he whispered, through stunned and massive eyes. And he slumped to the floor, where he convulsed violently. Foam began to appear at his lips and his eyes disappearing behind his skull. And I ran from there. Jane tried to block me in the final room, but I knocked her out cold with a closed fist. I was fast enough that her thoughts didn't assault me. I searched the front room for my phone, but as I had feared, it was now in pieces in a garbage can. Next, I searched Jane for her own phone, and once I located the device, I used her finger to unlock it and I dialed 911. Let me tell you, the worst pain that I have ever known was in that moment that I had placed the phone to my ear. It rang only once before I threw it at the wall with full velocity. The ring set off a mental chain reaction which I can now only compare to what a person having a stroke looks like. I fell to the ground shaking and holding my head. The ringing was so intense that I thought that it would kill me, but it finally faded. And groggily, I was able to return to my feet, with the girl still unconscious beside me. And from there, I simply got up and I ran to my car. I revved the engine. Then I sped away. Now, I know that you'll kill me for this, but I didn't go to the police. What would I even say? Hi, I'm telepathic and was just attacked by a crazy doctor in an old shopping district. I couldn't do that. I couldn't risk it. Even worse, I couldn't be around people. I wanted the chip out, but obviously that presented some other problems. What if removing it would kill me? What if it required some specific shut-off protocol? These were all the things causing me to panic. And I drove until I needed gas, so I stopped at the first place that I saw. It was a small 2-pump station with no cars out front. I figured this to be a safe bet for no human interaction. And I exited my car and I began pumping gas, but saw a very troubling thing. In the distance, a homeless man was approaching the station on foot. And I hurriedly prepaid with my card outside and I began pumping the fuel. And all the while praying that this person kept their distance. But he didn't. The man passed me, and in that moment I experienced the worst of the worst. Schizophrenia. I saw his demons through his eyes. I saw shadowy figures scratching at my arms and legs and face. I heard furious voices in my mind screaming at my insecurities and egging me to commit various terrible harm to others and as well as to myself. I felt the sting of insects and the slicing of knives not present. I felt all of this and more in the span of maybe 5 seconds. And as he passed, I felt my eyes moisten. I fell against my car as the sensations left as suddenly as they came. What a hell to live in. What a life to have. I got back in my car and I drove hopelessly north. And that's where I am now. My folks have the country home, remember? I'm writing this on my laptop with Ethernet because the Wi-Fi made my head hurt. I'm safe for now, but I don't know if I'll be pursued. I have something very valuable inside my head and its owners will want it returned. I'm probably going to be here for a while, so please don't come for me. I don't want to experience any more lives but my own. I just need time. I do love you. And I am sorry. I know that you warned against medical testing. You warned me and I didn't listen. I really wish I would have listened.